Today, we have a really exciting topic for you called Cancer at Work: What to Know and How We Support. I'm joined today by Jill Santercier here from Simply Human, representing that we are all human. And we'll let Jill introduce herself and her personal story in a minute. But first, I want to introduce to our audience a little bit about what we're talking about today. So, cancer in the workplace is more common than people think. And we're here to talk about how much of the experience is invisible. About 1 in 2 men will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. About 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. And we know it's prevalent. And the folks carrying this are the employees who have cancer, the caregivers that are living that journey alongside a loved one, and all of us in the surrounding community that are impacted by what we see unfold when someone has cancer. Today, we're here to be a resource to those employees feeling it. We want you to leave this session knowing you're not alone. You have a team behind you to help you advocate for yourself, whether it's through a second opinion like Access Hope or through other workplace supports. We're also here to support the leaders that want to gain more insight into the member experience. So, in the spirit of that, Jill and I thought we'd kick off by sharing our personal stories. So, I'll go first. I'm Nicola Kamath. I'm Chief Marketing Officer here at Access Hope. And a few weeks ago, I lost my father-in-law to a rare form of thyroid cancer. So, this is still, as you can imagine, pretty fresh for me. But I want to rewind almost 2 years because what happened in between matters. When my father-in-law was first diagnosed, he was given weeks to live with a rare form of thyroid cancer diagnosed in his community near his home in central Illinois. He found a subspecialist at Northwestern, one of Access Hope's foundational partners, who recommended an immunotherapy that's not commonly used for his cancer type, and it gave him 2 more years. I don't need to tell the folks in this audience what that can mean to someone, but I think that's a really personal reason why a lot of us are here in this podcast today. And I'd love to turn it over to Jill right now to share her personal story and a little bit about herself too and what brings her here today.
Thanks, Nicola. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think just knowing that we've both been through cancer journeys, a little bit different, but just to reinforce that you're not alone. Everyone attending is on a separate journey. And based on the statistics that you shared, there are probably a rare amount of people who have not been impacted, particularly in the workplace. So we know that everyone is navigating a different journey in the workplace, and you're not alone. And we've been there as well. So thanks for having me today. It's an honor to join you. My name is Jill, and I have spent over 20 years in-house HR, leading HR teams. And as of almost 3 years ago, I co-founded Simply Human with my business partner, and we consult and help organizations with HR initiatives, business initiatives, after spending many, many decades in-house in HR. So this podcast and this scenario is very personal for me as well. My father was diagnosed with cancer in early 2023, and I was in-house at a corporation at the time, and I'll get to kind of the impact there, but he chose not to treat the cancer. So for me, the impact and the journey was really more about navigating how I could be a caregiver to him and to my mom throughout that journey, while navigating work and family and all of the other things that many of us are dealing with. And so we lost him last August, about 8 months ago. But I'll tell you, the most impactful moment of his cancer journey and our support was that diagnosis. I mean, that diagnosis moment can be supremely impactful. We know that it's jarring, and if you're trying to work and support your family and life and all of the things that are going on, that moment is very intense. And so for me, the perspective that I bring in is how was I able to navigate that as an employee? How am I able to help HR teams and leaders support employees who are navigating similar diagnosis? Um, and so that's kind of why I joined today. So thank you for having me, Nicola.
Thank you for being here. So, in the remainder of this podcast, we're not here to talk your ear off for a couple of hours. This is not an academic session to learn about the science of cancer, though I do recommend, like, those can be quite quite enlightening. Um, we're here to answer core questions on behalf of employees, and we typically talk about some context, a misconception, and then how we want to move forward together on this podcast. So, the core question for today, getting at the context, is how can we seek support in the workplace if we're on a cancer journey? We've brought Jill here to represent the perspective from many employees with cancer. She's counseled as in house HR, as well as to represent the perspective of the HR leaders that carry the story of these employees. So, Jill, would love to hear your thoughts about how we can support workplace and the cancer journey, as well as support the invisible workload of cancer.
Yeah. It's a great mention about that invisible workload. As I mentioned, the moment of diagnosis, if you're an employee who's navigating a diagnosis or as a caregiver, that's really an impactful moment. And most people don't know what they need in that moment. So it's very hard to say,
I wouldn't.
right. I personally froze and I
Yeah.
was in HR. And
Yeah.
it took a number of days before I was able to even share the situation in a text. And if someone had asked me in that moment, "What do you need?" Of course, the answer would have been, "I have no idea. I don't know. I'm
Yep.
just
Yep.
on autopilot right now." And so I think the response is it's jarring. No one has a playbook or a blueprint for what you should do or what you should say. um, and also, by the way, for my HR peeps, asking, you know, what do you need in that moment may not be the most ideal question. A better response just could be, I'm here, as you navigate this, and here are the different support mechanisms that we have. Lean into the Access Hope team to help you navigate. And then once the path becomes a little bit more clear, on treatment and what does this diagnosis mean or what does this mean for my family member, I think that's when you can start exploring what you need personally, whether it's time off or flexibility in schedule. All those things really should come after the moment of impact. So we recognize that it's a moment where most people don't know what they need, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing from you, Jill, is this is not just a benefits like a regular here's your pamphlet. It's a life and work collision. And it's experienced a bunch of different ways by folks. Um, you know, I think one thing, and this kind of moves us to the misconception, support starts with understanding that doesn't happen outside of work. It happens during work every day. Um, there's a key stat to share here with the audience. We won't leave us without a little bit of research in this podcast. Uh, 40 to 60% of people with cancer continue working during treatment. And I bet 100% of caregivers do as well. We see in the data and in practice that many employees don't step away from work and they keep working through exhaustion and a lot of things that they don't feel comfortable mentioning in the workplace. Um, so, what can someone do? And I know I'm here for Access Hope. So, but I wanna, have a little bit of humor with this. That, what can an employee do that maybe you mentioned that text is hard to write? They don't feel comfortable talking with someone about their cancer diagnosis. I think often folks think there's nothing they can do, and that's the misconception. They have to keep it to themselves and bear it alone. Um, what's your perspective, and how would you approach getting support when you don't really wanna talk about it?
Mm, that's a great question. I think, again, it's taking some time to process the diagnosis, whether it's for you or for a family member, and really being sure that you're comfortable raising your hand when you do need to ask for support or help. That stat, when I read that, that 40 to 60% was pretty shocking to me because if you think about that, that percentage of the workforce who's actively navigating a diagnosis or actively a caregiver and also trying to work and balance life at the same time, we know that's a lot. So I think it's very personal and you have to take some time, again, lean into maybe it's just the Access Hope team because they're aware of the diagnosis. Maybe you've reached out. They're helping you navigate from a clinical care perspective. They can probably also support, what type of care that is and specifically what that will mean. And then when you're prepared and when you're ready, you can lean on internal resources. But I would suggest just starting with, your manager, your direct manager, and saying, if you don't know, I don't know. I don't know what this means yet, but this is what I'm navigating and what I'm dealing with. And just kind of opening that line of communication. It also enables you to find out about other resources that might be available as you navigate that journey.
Yeah, and let's talk about the types of resources that might be available. Some folks are here because they have Access Hope. Um, Jill, as an and we should talk about that, right? So, because maybe folks are here because they don't know. So, Access Hope offers this expert opinion on your specific type of cancer. It's a lot like my personal story, kind of serendipitous that I work here, right? But you're in that moment, you don't know what the right care looks like, and you're having a difficult time figuring that out. Um, Within your employer, you have access to a second opinion from someone who does specialize in your cancer. And so, what is great, someone has that. Jill, how does someone approach their HR team if they don't want to talk about it, but they want to learn, hey, I want that second opinion, or I want something like that, but I don't want to talk about my cancer?
Mhm. A lot of times the resources are, posted within, an intranet or something. So they're accessible without having to have that conversation. But I also think it's okay to have the conversation that you're navigating something challenging, you're not really prepared, and you don't know what it means yet. So, can you please share some of the resources that might help me navigate this? Maybe there's an EAP, maybe there's some, outside coaching or mental health support that can complement the Access Hope Care. So, as you're going along that journey, it's also resources that could help you in figuring out what's best for you. You don't have to open up the conversation of, I may need to take a leave, or, those things are far away. It's more of a, what resources are available as I figure this out? And then ask for permission, as I'm going through this and I'm learning a little bit more about what this journey means for me. I'll come back, once the dust has settled a little bit and I know more, and then maybe we can have another conversation about it.
I love that, Jill. I love that way of being authentically oneself. Something that occurs to me that you mentioned earlier as well is that a lot of folks are caregivers. Is it awkward or like then, just talking about these misconceptions? Can caregivers go to HR looking for support as well for their loved one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be a direct caregiver, I mean, I wasn't providing actual care outside of, being my father's daughter, but I was helping him and my mom navigate that care. Eventually it became, hospice care and, helping navigate the appointments and what does this mean and understanding what it meant. And so that is also a burden, that caregiving responsibility, whether it's an appointment during the day or, going over to understand what was heard. Did they hear things correctly? What does it mean? What are next steps? So I think approaching with that caregiver mindset as well, you don't have to have all the answers. You can simply say, listen, this is my role in this journey, and I don't yet know exactly what that means, but would just love to have the conversation and find out how I can be supported as I navigate this. What's available to me? What are some of the things that I can do so that I'm not pulled so tightly that things feel overwhelming? Maybe it's a flexible schedule. Maybe there's a certain, PTO or potentially a leave, depending on the severity of the situation and the journey. But it's fine to approach your manager or HR as a caregiver and have that conversation.
And Jill, just to finish out some of these misconceptions, what are the different ways that some folks want to have a conversation with HR about their cancer journey, and just validating for our listeners here that
Mhm.
it's all okay to show up in different ways?
That's a great question. The the answer that I would give is everyone is different. Everyone is different in how they're approaching things, where they are in dealing with a diagnosis, and there's not a one size fits all. As much as, well-intentioned HR people want to create policies that include everyone and support every possible scenario, it's just not possible. So that's why the conversation is the best starting point, and it's also okay to say, "I have no idea what I need right now, but I want to let someone know that I'm dealing with this, and I wanna keep the lines of communication open, and that way you can navigate together with a manager or with an HR team to create the most support that you need in the journey. But you don't have to have all of the answers when you have that initial conversation."
Thank you, Jill. And now I want to shift to that last section of our conversation, which is like the real world impact. We talk a lot about, particularly in cancer awareness. How do we shift from awareness to action? And what actually makes the biggest difference when supporting our colleagues in the workplace? We want to acknowledge we've actually gotten a question during this podcast from a listener that says, one of my colleagues was just diagnosed with cancer. The prognosis looks good, but I know it's still challenging for them to work through. What do you believe is the most important way that I can support them during this time? I thought that was a really fitting question from the audience for us to address here in our closing about how we best support employees in the workplace and how and what employees can do to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for sending that in. I think the best thing to do is just to be there for someone. Um, you don't have to have the answers. You don't have to solve for someone or give them advice. You may not have any advice to give, but just to be there and just check in. I would we co-own Simply Human, so I
Mhm.
would, if I don't mention the human side of things, then that would be bad, but just, if you think about a friend who's navigating something challenging, outside of work, maybe it is a cancer diagnosis, maybe it's some other health challenge, just being there. Maybe you were that friend and someone just checked in on you and sent you a text and said, "Hey, I just wanna check in and see how you're doing. Is there anything I can do? Do you need anything?" I think just being there, offering support, along the way. Oftentimes, we have heard stories of folks who have had, in this scenario, a cancer diagnosis, and some of the feedback that we've heard is people tend to shy away because they don't know what to say. They're not sure if it's serious. They don't know the right words, so they tend to shut down and shy away. And I think that that's the worst thing to do. I think you don't have to have all of the right words. Again, just be there, just check in, and ask, "Hey, what can I do to support you?" And maybe the answer is nothing. Maybe it's just, "Hey, it's great to hear from you," or "I'm thinking about you." I think that's really the best thing that you can do to support someone, especially after an initial diagnosis when things are pretty volatile.
I love that, Jill. Just be there, sit with them. And the theme throughout this is, from an HR perspective, make sure that there are resources and programs available, easily accessible when folks need them.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Absolutely.
that. And with that, we'll close today's episode and look forward to catching you on the next one.